There's a quiet moment when you realize something inside you has already ended. Not in chaos, not in collapse, but in certainty. If you've been feeling different lately, less reactive, less afraid, yet unable to return to who you used to be, this isn't confusion. This is a timeline shift. The old self may still speak, but it no longer holds the wheel. If this message resonates with you, type "I received this shift" in the comments. Not for me, but as a signal to yourself. Because what you're about to hear next is not information. It's the doorway into a much bigger remembering. Stay with me. You know, this kind of shift never announces itself. It doesn't come with signs in the sky, no dramatic ending, no clear line you can point to and say that's where everything changed. It arrives quietly, almost politely. One day you notice you don't react the same way anymore. Something that used to hook you doesn't quite land. The fear still knocks, but it doesn't stay for dinner. And you might wonder if something is wrong with you, if you've gone numb, if you've lost your edge. But listen to me, nothing is wrong. What's happening is simpler than that, and much bigger. The part of you that used to grip the wheel, the part that needed to predict, protect, control, it's tired now, not defeated, just finished. It still shows up sometimes, in old thoughts, old habits, old reflexes that fire before you can stop them. But notice this, you're watching it now. You're not inside it the way you used to be. You're standing a few steps back, aware, present, quietly breathing. That distance matters. Aquarius energy has always been about perspective, seeing the system from above, understanding the pattern instead of drowning in it. And right now, you're not breaking down, you're zooming out. There's a strange relief that comes with that, a softness you didn't expect. Almost like grief, but without the pain. Grief for a version of you that worked so hard to survive. That believed tension was safety. That thought control meant stability. You don't need to judge that version, it got you here. But it doesn't get to decide what happens next. This is the moment where life starts meeting you differently. Not because you're forcing change, but because you're no longer resisting it. Things may feel slower now. Or quieter. Like the space between waves. And if you're honest, that quiet doesn't scare you the way it used to. There's intelligence in it. A pulse. A subtle sense that something is aligning behind the scenes. You don't have to chase answers anymore. They're already moving toward you. Right now, all that's being asked of you is to stay here. To stay honest with what you feel. To let go of the urge to rush clarity. Because clarity is forming on its own. And as you rest into that knowing, you may begin to sense it, a different current beneath your life. Not loud. Not demanding. Just steady. Certain. And if you listen closely enough, you'll realize it's been there all along. You might still feel it sometimes. That familiar voice. The one that asks quietly, "Are you sure this is safe?" It doesn't shout. It doesn't threaten. It just whispers at the edges of your awareness, right when things start to feel open. That voice isn't your enemy. It never was. It's the part of you that learned how to survive in a world that didn't always make room for your sensitivity. The part that stayed alert. That learned to scan rooms. That learned to hold back light just enough to stay connected. It's important to say this out loud. You don't need to fight that part. You don't need to silence it. You don't need to prove you've outgrown it. Because it isn't trying to ruin your life. It's trying to stay alive. When doubt rises, when hesitation pulls you toward what feels familiar, it's not failure, it's habit. The old self only knows one way to exist. By being noticed, by being listened to, by staying at the center of your attention. And here's the shift you may not have named yet. You're not feeding it the way you used to. You hear the thought, but you don't build a home inside it. You feel the pull toward safety, but you don't shrink to fit it. There's a pause now. A breath, a space between impulse and response. That space is everything. Aquarius energy doesn't destroy old systems, it outgrows them. You don't uninstall the old operating system by force. You simply stop running your life on it. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, it loses authority. Not because you took power from it, but because you stopped handing power over. There's a maturity in that. A quiet confidence. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself. You might notice yourself choosing differently. Saying less. Listening more. You might walk away from conversations that used to drain you, without needing to explain. You might feel less urgency to convince anyone of who you are. That's not indifference. That's alignment. The old self may still knock, but it's knocking on a door that no longer opens automatically, and something else begins to take the lead. Not loud, not forceful, just steady. A deeper intelligence, a calm knowing that doesn't rush, a sense that you don't need to be smaller to be safe anymore. This is where trust starts to replace control. Not blind trust. Earned trust. The kind that comes from watching yourself stay present even when uncertainty lingers. And as that trust settles in, you may feel a subtle relief in your body. like unclenching a fist you didn't realize was tight. Nothing dramatic happens here. No sudden breakthrough. Just a soft shift, a rebalancing. And as you rest into that new center, you might begin to notice something else stirring. A different rhythm. A quieter pull. Almost like life itself is leaning in to meet you where you are. There's a moment when rest starts to feel unfamiliar, almost suspicious. You sit still, and something inside you asks, shouldn't I be doing more? That question didn't come from nowhere. It was taught. For a long time, the world measured your worth by movement, by effort, by how much you could carry without breaking, especially you. With your Aquarian mind always reaching ahead, always seeing what could be better, always sensing the future before it arrived, you learned early that slowing down felt risky, like losing momentum, like letting go of control. But here's what's quietly changing now. Rest isn't pulling you backward anymore. It's placing you exactly where you belong. When you stop forcing the next step, something subtle happens. Your body exhales. Your thoughts lose their edge. The noise softens. This isn't giving up. It's stepping out of resistance. You've spent years pushing against currents you didn't even choose, trying to prove stability, trying to earn peace, trying to hold everything together with willpower alone. That kind of effort leaves a mark, not always visible, but heavy. And lately, you may have noticed that weight starting to lift. Not all at once, just enough to feel the difference. When you allow yourself to rest without guilt, energy doesn't disappear. It reorganizes. It moves differently, more intelligently, less desperate. Life stops feeling like something you have to wrestle into place. It begins to feel responsive, like it's listening. Aquarius energy thrives here, not in burnout, but in alignment. You weren't designed to force outcomes. You were designed to tune into patterns, to sense timing, to know when to move and when to wait. Letting go doesn't mean losing direction. It means trusting the larger intelligence you've always felt but rarely named. The one that doesn't rush. The one that doesn't panic. The one that knows you don't need to exhaust yourself to matter. Have you noticed how clarity comes easier when you're not chasing it? How answers arrive when you stop demanding them? How the right words show up when you're not rehearsing? That's the current carrying you now. It doesn't push. It invites. And when you float instead of fight, you begin to see how much of your life was shaped by tension you no longer need. There's a quiet confidence forming here. Not loud, not performative. Just a sense that you don't have to prove your place in the world anymore. As you settle into this rhythm, something opens. A readiness. A gentle curiosity about what might meet you next. Not because you chased it, but because you finally made room. And if you stay with that feeling, without naming it too quickly, you may sense a new kind of movement beginning. Soft, precise, like life itself adjusting its pace to walk beside you. There's something you're beginning to remember. Not as a thought, more like a feeling returning to the body. That you were never meant to strain this hard to be yourself. Your true nature was never built on effort. Never designed around pressure. Never dependent on becoming someone else first. Before the world taught you to reach, to prove, to justify your existence, there was an ease in you. A quiet normalcy. So natural, it didn't need a name. That's the part of you waking up now. You may notice it in small ways. Moments where you stop explaining. Moments where you don't correct the room. Moments where you let silence finish the sentence for you. That's not disengagement. That's truth settling in. The real you doesn't push. It doesn't hustle for approval. It doesn't ask permission to take up space. It simply is. And that simplicity can feel unfamiliar at first, especially if you've lived a long time believing that effort equals value. But notice how your body responds when you stop forcing. The shoulders drop. The breath deepens. The mind stops racing ahead of the present moment. This is where you function best. Not when you're trying to manage outcomes, but when you're aligned with yourself. When you turn inward now, something subtle begins to rearrange outside of you. Not because you planned it. Not because you controlled it better, but because you stepped out of the way. Life knows how to organize itself when you're not gripping it. People respond differently. Opportunities feel less heavy. Decisions come with less noise attached. You don't need to chase clarity anymore. It arrives when you're still enough to receive it. Aquarius energy understands this deeply. You were never meant to micromanage reality. You were meant to sense patterns, to move with timing, to trust intelligence beyond logic. The more you stop trying to earn worth, the more visible your worth becomes. And here's the part few people talk about. Ease doesn't make you passive. It makes you precise. When effort drops away, what remains is intention without distortion. Your actions come from alignment, not anxiety. You speak when it matters. You move when it's time. You rest without guilt. And something ancient inside you recognizes this as home. You might feel moments of doubt still surface. That's okay. The mind will ask, is this really enough? But the deeper answer isn't verbal. It's the calm you feel when you stop asking. You're not losing momentum, you're shedding friction. And as you continue to let go of control, not all at once, just honestly, you may notice how life begins to meet you halfway, like it's been waiting for you to soften your grip. And if you stay with that sensation, without rushing to define it, you'll sense a quiet readiness forming. A feeling that you don't need to push into what's coming. It's already adjusting its pace to arrive exactly where you are. There was a time when you thought heaven was something ahead of you. Something earned. Something waiting on the other side of effort, healing, becoming. That idea didn't come from nowhere. It was handed down gently, wrapped in achievement, disguised as motivation. But something inside you has stopped chasing it. Not because you gave up, but because you noticed something strange. The moments that felt most alive, most real, most whole, they were never in the future. They happened when you were fully here, unsplit, undivided. Aquarius understands this instinctively, not as belief, as recognition. Heaven isn't a destination. It doesn't wait for permission. It doesn't sit behind a finish line. It shows up as a state, a frequency you tune into, a way of being that doesn't require explanation. It isn't in your body, not in your title, not in the story you tell about who you are. It's the quiet aliveness beneath all of that. You feel it when the mind goes still enough to listen. When you stop measuring yourself against invisible standards. When you're not trying to be impressive or resolved. There's a subtle peace there. Not dramatic, not euphoric, just real. And what's surprising is how ordinary it feels. Not dull, but familiar. Like remembering something you never truly lost. In that state, nothing needs to be proven. Nothing needs to be fixed. Nothing needs to be rushed. You're not performing your life anymore, you're inhabiting it. And when you rest there, even briefly, something remarkable happens. The outside world begins to reorganize, not all at once. Not perfectly, but naturally. You don't force conversations to resolve, they soften on their own. You don't chase alignment. It finds you in quieter ways. Decisions feel lighter, not because they're easier, but because you're not carrying the weight of becoming through them. This is the paradox most people miss. When you stop trying to arrive somewhere else, you become available to what's already here. And what's already here is intelligent, responsive, deeply alive. You don't control this state, you allow it. You don't maintain it through discipline. You return to it through honesty. Whenever you notice yourself striving again, you don't need to judge it, you simply notice. And that noticing is enough to bring you back. There's a sense now that life is less of a test and more of a conversation. Less about getting it right and more about staying present. And if you sit with that for a moment, without naming it too quickly, you may feel something opening inside your chest. A gentle readiness. A quiet invitation. As if the space you've entered isn't asking you to go anywhere at all. It's asking you to stay. There's a gentle truth settling in now. One that doesn't rush you. One that doesn't demand improvement. You don't need to arrive anywhere else to be complete. For a long time, you were taught to live as if something essential was missing. As if the real version of you existed somewhere in the future. Just beyond the next lesson, the next healing, the next breakthrough. But sit with this for a moment. Notice how exhausting that story has been. Always reaching, always refining, always postponing wholeness. And yet, here you are, breathing, aware, present. Nothing is actually lacking in this moment. There is no final destination waiting to grant you permission to rest. No perfected version of you holding the key to peace. No someday where everything suddenly clicks into place. That idea was never truth. It was momentum without an endpoint. What you're beginning to sense now is different, quieter, more grounded. A recognition that wholeness was never something to achieve. It was something to notice. Right now is not a pause before life begins. This is life fully formed. Already enough. The feeling of being stuck didn't come from reality itself. It came from believing you were incomplete. From reacting to the illusion that something was missing. When that belief loosens its grip, the tension dissolves with it. You don't need to force clarity anymore. You don't need to chase resolution. The moment you stop arguing with the present, the in-between quietly disappears. Aquarius energy understands this shift on a deep level. You've always sensed that identity is fluid, that becoming never truly ends. So why delay peace until a finish line that keeps moving? There's freedom in admitting you are already what you've been trying to become. Not perfect, not finished, but whole. Whole enough to breathe without anxiety. Whole enough to choose without fear. Whole enough to let life meet you where you stand. This realization doesn't make you passive. It makes you grounded. When you stop searching for yourself in the future, you become fully available in the present. And from that presence, movement happens naturally, not driven by lack, not fueled by urgency, but guided by something quieter. More honest, you may notice that decisions feel cleaner now, less dramatic, less loaded. You're no longer trying to escape who you are. You're learning how to stand with yourself. And that changes everything. As the illusion of lack fades, something opens. Not as a rush, but as a steady clarity. A sense that life doesn't need to be fixed before it can be lived. That meaning doesn't wait on perfection. That you don't need to become someone else to move forward. Stay with that feeling. Let it settle into your chest. Let it soften the edges of your thoughts. Because when you stop chasing what you already are, something very real begins to move. Not from effort, but from alignment. And it has been waiting patiently for you to notice that you were never behind at all. Something else begins to change once you stop living from pressure. The way you move through the world feels different. You're not waiting for permission anymore. Not from people. Not from circumstances. Not even from yourself. Action still happens, but it rises from a quieter place. In this new rhythm, you don't force movement. You feel it. There's a moment when an idea lands in you, not as urgency, but as clarity. It doesn't shout. It doesn't beg. It simply feels right. That's how inspiration works when fear steps aside. You may have been taught that action has to hurt to matter. That sacrifice proves sincerity. That exhaustion is the price of progress. But that story was built on survival, not wisdom. The actions that come now are lighter, more precise. They arrive when your body is ready to move, not when your mind is panicking about falling behind. You'll notice this especially in the small choices. What you say yes to, what you quietly decline, how you pace your days. There's less drama around decision-making, less inner debate. More listening. You're not outsourcing your direction anymore. Aquarius energy has always trusted intuition over impulse. But intuition only speaks clearly when the nervous system is calm. And yours is learning how to rest. When inspiration comes from this place, it doesn't drain you, it nourishes you. You might act, and instead of feeling depleted, you feel more yourself. That's how you know it's real. This kind of action doesn't need applause. It doesn't need to be justified. It carries its own quiet authority. You're not proving your worth anymore. You're expressing it. And the world responds differently to that. People listen more closely. Opportunities feel less conditional. Timing feels less hostile. Not because life suddenly became easy, but because you stopped fighting it. You're no longer driven by the fear of losing ground. You're guided by a sense of inner alignment. That alignment doesn't rush. It doesn't compare. It doesn't compete. It moves when it's time. There will still be moments of hesitation. That's human. But hesitation no longer owns you. You don't spiral inside it. You let it pass through. You've learned the difference between caution and contraction. And that difference changes everything. As you keep listening instead of forcing, trust builds naturally. Not blind trust, earned trust. The kind that comes from watching yourself show up honestly again and again without abandoning your center. This is how momentum forms now, not in bursts of adrenaline, but in steady coherence. And as you settle into this way of moving, something subtle begins to unfold around you. A sense that what you do next doesn't need to be pushed into existence. It's already aligning itself with the version of you that knows how to listen. Stay with that feeling. Let it guide the next breath. The next choice. Because what's meeting you now isn't asking for effort. It's responding to your readiness. Something settles in you when you stop measuring your life by symbols, by numbers, by milestones that were never meant to define your worth. You begin to feel it in the simplest moments. The way you sip your coffee, the way you pause before responding, the way you notice light shifting across a wall. This is where real richness lives, not in what you accumulate, but in how present you are while you're here. For a long time, you were taught to look outside yourself for proof of abundance, success, security, validation, and that search kept you restless, always checking, always comparing, always wondering if you were falling behind. But something changes when you recognize what's already alive inside you. There is a fullness in being fully present, a quiet satisfaction that doesn't need witnesses. When you feel that inner abundance, you stop clinging to outcomes. You stop bargaining with the future. Fear loosens its grip because it no longer has a job. You're not surviving anymore, you're living. And as that shift deepens, the old self doesn't collapse in a dramatic way. It simply fades, not pushed, not fought, not judged. It dissolves because it's no longer necessary. The part of you that once hustled for safety realizes safety doesn't come from control. It comes from trust. Trust in your ability to be with life as it unfolds. Trust in your capacity to respond rather than react. Trust in the intelligence that moves through you when you're aligned. This is the kind of wealth no one can take from you. It doesn't fluctuate with circumstances. It doesn't disappear when plans change. It lives in the quality of your attention. And when your attention rests in your heart, life begins to feel generous again. You notice how much support was always there, how many small moments carried you, how often you were held without realizing it. This awareness softens you, not into passivity, but into openness. You stop forcing the river. You let it carry you. And the strange thing is, the more you allow that flow, the more precise your life becomes, less scattered, less noisy, more intentional. You don't need to announce this shift to anyone. It shows up in how you move, in how you listen, in how you choose peace without explanation. This is Aquarius wisdom at its purest. Detached from illusion, rooted in truth, committed to humanity through presence, not sacrifice. As you stay with your heart, moment by moment, you may sense a deep calm spreading through your body. A knowing that you don't need to chase what belongs to you, that what's meant to meet you will recognize you by your stillness. And if you rest here, without rushing to name what comes next, you'll feel it. The current beneath everything. Steady, alive, carrying you forward without effort. You might have noticed something by now. This message didn't ask you to change. It didn't tell you what to fix. It didn't promise a new version of you. And that's surprise. Because the shift you've been feeling was never about becoming more. It was about remembering what never left. If you stayed with me until this moment, it's not an accident. Aquarius energy doesn't move by coincidence. It moves by recognition. Something in you knew this wasn't just a video, it was a mirror. And maybe, quietly, you feel a little less alone now. That's the real transmission. Not words, not concepts, but connection. Before you move on, pause for one breath. Just one. And if this resonated with you, leave a comment below saying, "I trust myself," not for the algorithm, not for the channel, but as a signal to your own nervous system that you heard yourself tonight. If you feel called to stay connected, subscribe. This space is being built for Aquarians like you, the thinkers, the feelers, the ones who see ahead and still care deeply about humanity. And trust this, the journey doesn't end here. Another message is already forming. Another alignment is already moving toward you. So stay close, stay open, and most of all, keep trusting that quiet intelligence within you. It hasn't failed you yet.